Press record.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Coming to you remotely from Edinburgh in Scotland. Glad to be participating virtually in the conference. So this is a little bit of a presentation about our RSpace, the electronic and inventory management system, and our EOSC DIH pilot. So for those who don't know, what is RSpace? Well, it's technically known as an electronic lab notebook. So what's that? Well, it depends what you think of it, but it can be a digital replacement for paper notebooks. Maybe Google Docs for Science is another way of thinking about it. That's kind of thinking about it from the user's perspective. It's also a research data management tool. So it becomes a bridge between the preparation and archiving and sharing phases of research. And it's designed to enhance data capture and enhance and permit data sharing as well. A picture tells 1,000 words. So this picture really tells the RSpace story. At the center of the graphic, you can see that there's RSpace itself, which consists of 3 components. One is the electronic lab notebook, as I was just mentioning. One is a fully fledged sample management system, and these two are deeply integrated, so you can associate your sample data with your experimental data. And thirdly, it has a series of powerful APIs, which allows extensibility and integration with other products. Connectivity is at the core of our mission at RSpace. And so if you look to the left, you see that it's possible to associate data from external resources, such as file stores, where you might be keeping your big data, like imaging data or sequencing data. It's possible to link those to the write-up of your experimental record in RSpace itself. We also have integrations with specialist tools for specialist kinds of data. So for example, the PIRAT Animal Colony Management System. Cluster Market is an equipment scheduling app, so that it's possible to associate those specialist kinds of data and again, bring them in the record of your experiments. We also integrate with other tools like Protocols.io, for example. In addition to that, RSpace has fully fledged chemistry and biology capabilities, which we get through integrations with other tools, and we integrate with things like Slack and MS Teams for collaboration as well. RSpace also has full support for research data management and verification of data. So it's possible to ingest data management plans into RSpace, associate them again with the write-up of your experiments, of your research, and then you can export the data management plan and all of the data that you've created to repositories so that it's possible to share the data, make it public to enhance reproducibility and reusability. Who uses RSpace? Research labs, primarily in fields like biology and chemistry, but also an increasingly broad a spectrum of users, things like ecology, physics, material science, all sorts of related fields as well. And who are our customers? Well, our customers are primarily universities. So the users are the labs, but the universities deploy RSpace at the institutional level so that everyone can get access to it. And so, as I showed in the graphic, it's possible to integrate RSpace with other institutional resources that people use. And here's an example of how RSpace can facilitate research infrastructure and the research data lifecycle from one of the large universities that we work with, University College London. So again, you can see here, RSpace can integrate with the data management plan that UCL uses, as well as various data storage devices, and then export can be made to the data repository that UCL uses as well. And finally, what are we doing in the DIH pilot, which we're excited to be part of? Really, it's quite consistent with that graphic that I showed earlier. We're adding Zenodo, which is the most widely used generalist repository, as yet another repository that it's be possible to export from RSpace to Zenodo. And we're also integrating with Argos, which is, for those who don't know, it's an innovative new data management planning tool, which is, I think, is quite likely to become very standard in the EOSC universe. So thanks for having us, and hope we're able to meet some of you in person. With that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Rob, who's actually going to give you a brief live demo of RSpace. You're on mute, Rob.
Yeah, I am. Okay, thank you, Rory. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Let's see. Okay, so you've heard a little bit about the big picture of how RSpace works, and I understand. So thank you for joining us again today. I'm Rob Day, and I'm located in Columbus, Ohio, and we are looking at the RSpace ELN system today. Hopefully you can see my screen here, and you can see that what I have queued up here is I actually have Chrome set up on my Macintosh. We're already logged into RSpace here. And I actually also am projecting my iPad mini onto RSpace too as well. So if necessary, we can jump over to the mobile version of the device. RSpace is specifically configured to work with any browser on any platform. I routinely perform these demos using Safari or Chrome or Opera, Firefox, Brave, Edge. They're all fully supported, as are the browsers on your standard mobile devices. I actually really like doing RSpace demonstrations on my iPad mini. I feel like the iPad mini is just the ideal device for working in the lab. I feel like a lot of phones are too small and a lot of standard computers are actually too big. I'm going to log in with my thumbprint, which is a nice little technology that RSpace and the iPad support. And if I want to, I can now just tap login, and that will actually log me into RSpace on my mobile device here. And you can see, I can see this either in portrait mode, or if I want to, I can put it into landscape mode to see that text nice and clearly. So the interface is designed specifically to work with both a mobile device and with a computer. For now, let's just focus on the desktop here, and we'll take a look at RSpace on Chrome. And you can see when you first logged in, you're brought to an area that's called the workspace. So the workspace is analogous to the desktop of your computer. And this is where you'll see various different documents where you create your content and describe your research. And those documents can be organized into hierarchic folders, or if you prefer, they can be organized into a narrative story of your research using a structure that we call a notebook. Within a notebook, you'll always see a sequence of documents describing what you've done over linear time. We also have an area here called the gallery, which is essentially equivalent to something like your hard drive. RSpace really does at least double, maybe even triple duty for your lab, in that it supports both the telling of the story of your research. It supports hierarchic storage of data files in any format from any source, replacing something like Dropbox or OneDrive, but doing so in a highly compliant and scientifically compatible way. And we also, as you see across the top here, we have a number of other functional areas for the product that include our full-featured inventory system, which allows you to manage any large set of real or conceptual items. And we can go back to the ELN at any time to also see some other functional areas, including a space where you can essentially configure some of the third-party integrations that you might want to work with your particular server or accounts. And we have an area here where we can go to what's called My RSpace, which essentially is sort of a dashboard and a settings area. From here, you can do a number of things. If you're the principal investigator, you can go to the My Lab Groups area, and you can choose which lab you're interested in managing today. And that will allow you to see a list of all the people who are working under you in your lab. If you want to, you can immediately jump to a user folder to see the work of a particular user who's busily working in your lab. Or if you want to, you can also access the work of former users who used to be in your lab, but have now graduated and moved away. RSpace is fully 21 CFR 11 compliant, and all of the data of your former users stays in the system forever, can easily be accessed and, if necessary, reorganized according to your needs. You'll also see within the My RSpace area, we have this all-important auditing area, which allows me to get the full audit report for the server so that I can see all activity that I have access to. And this is useful not just for compliance and for understanding data flows, but it's also great for reproducibility and for making sure that you can better understand what you've done in the past so that you don't second guess yourself and wonder whether or not that anomalous result you got was really the result of interacting with a particular sample that perhaps you entered in error. These unique identifiers over here can be used to access any unique resource within the system, including items within the sample tracking system. And you can see also that if we go back to that audit trail again, I can do things like if there's a particular sample that I'm especially interested in, I can select that sample and copy it. And then within the audit trail, I can go ahead and filter the system and look just for history related to that particular sample. So now if I want to, when I do a search for just that sample here, you'll see that the audit trail is restricted to interactions with that particular sample. And I can see here that the sample was created on this date by this person. And then after that, I can see every action that's ever been performed with that sample. I can see who's had access to it. Anytime it's been edited or moved or used in an experiment will be recorded. If I go back to the workspace again, I can briefly show you some of the content creation procedures in RSpace. Creating new work in the workspace is incredibly easy. At any time, you can just say create. And from here, you can make new folders or notebooks. You can make documents based on workflows that you've used recently. RSpace will remember your most commonly used workflows and show them to you in this create menu. You'll also be able to make documents based on pre-existing structures called forms and templates that allow you to reproduce your workflows reliably. But you can also make new RSpace documents based on MS Word files, Evernote documents, or even protocols imported from protocols.io. Let's go ahead and make initially just a basic document. And a basic document is one of the simplest things that I can make in RSpace. When I create a basic document, it's going to present me with something that looks a lot like a blank sheet of paper, or an empty text file, or an empty MS Word file if you prefer. Here we can see our rich text editing toolbar that allows me to do all sorts of different things in RSpace. I can also access from here various different specialized tools that scientists work with routinely that can help you save time while you're working during the day. You can, for example, bring up your PCR master mix calculation tool or a number of other different sorts of scientific calculators. We also give you access to a range of other different sorts of calculators that are maintained by third parties so that you can access these quickly from within your ELN if you need to. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time creating content for you, but what I'll do instead is if I say cancel and I go back to the workspace, I can choose a document that I've made previously to show you some of the rich content that you can create within the context of an RSpace basic document. So, this is the untitled document that I just made. If I wanted to, by the way, I can actually delete that. Notice that if I delete something within RSpace, it's never really truly deleted from the system. It actually stays in the system forever and is still relocatable in accordance with 21 CFR 11. Notice that once I've selected this item by clicking on the select box, either with a computer or by tapping on it on a mobile device, I get a contextual range of different sorts of commands that I can perform with that item. I can delete it, I could export it, I could see the revision history, I can share it with my colleagues, I can even publish it to make it globally available to other scientists worldwide. Let's go ahead and select this one and just click delete for now to get rid of that empty document that I don't need. Now what I'll do is I'll take a look at this content example document that already has some pre-made content in it. So here you can see some of the sorts of things that you can do in RSpace. You can build rich formatted text in any kind of format that you want. You can work with images, which you can freely annotate within RSpace by double tapping on the image, and that will produce for you the image inside our sketch editor. I can add new annotations here, or I can edit the existing annotations. I could maybe select an annotation that I no longer need, and I could go ahead and I could delete that if I wanted to. Or I can add new annotations. I could choose an annotation tool and pick a color and just go ahead and highlight something that's of interest to me and say insert, drop that image back onto the page again. Notice that that annotation has no effect on the original underlying data, so you can add whatever annotations you want to your images. You can also drag and drop in other files and other formats. Essentially, you can add any file in any format from any source to RSpace, either by dragging and dropping it to the document, or if you prefer, you can use the insert command to go ahead and bring up a file chooser. Or if you want to, you can insert files that are already in RSpace that are stored safely in the gallery. For example, I could say insert from gallery. I could go to my image area. I could choose an image that I find interesting and say insert, and that will add that image directly to the page. Notice that this image now has not been replicated. This is a file that's already in RSpace. And this is nice because now I can use this file in as many different contexts or experimental workflows as I want without constantly adding new copies of it, which then become difficult to track. If I look at the information for this document, I can see that it's been signed a unique identifier by RSpace. I can see some other metadata. I could add a searchable caption if I want to. And I can even click on Show Link Documents to see if this document has been used in any other experiments besides the one that we're currently looking at. And in this case, it looks like it is not. This is the only experiment that this particular image has been used in. If I go back into view mode now, you'll see that RSpace will display nicely for me most standard file types that I've added to this document. For example, here we can see a range of MS Office documents. I can click the plus sign to see a slightly larger preview of each document, or I can say view to open it up in a high resolution view in a new tab using a technology that's built right into RSpace. Or if I prefer, I could go ahead and open up this document in MS Office. Microsoft Online is just one of the many rich integrations that we support to allow you to work with file types that you often use in your day-to-day experimental workflows. And you can even edit this document directly from within your browser if you want to, or if you prefer, if you don't like working with MS Office Online or you don't have a suitable MS Office Online account, you can always just go ahead and download that file to your local computer, edit it any way you want, and then click Upload New Version to return it back to RSpace as a new version. This download, edit, upload seamless workflow is supported for all file types, no matter what they are, and you can use whatever applications you have on your local computer to work with those files if you want to. We also work with some common standard scientific file types like genetic sequence files to allow you to be able to see some of the content of that file. For example, in this case, we have a particular genetic sequence, and you can see our colleagues at Snapgene have provided us with a plugin that allows us to be able to better see the sequences. But also, if I want to, I can see a table of the known restriction enzyme sites. Or I could go ahead and look at a table of the open reading frames. Or if necessary, I can just go ahead and view the entire thing as a FASTA, which would then allow me to see the raw sequence, which I could then go ahead and just simply copy to my clipboard and use elsewhere if I wanted to. I can generate tables in RSpace with lots of rich content in them. I can copy and paste tables from either external websites, or in this case, this is a block of text copied from an Excel file that I just simply copied and pasted into the document. I can also go ahead and work with calculations tables. So we support the production of useful calculations, which you can then store and then reuse instantly in RSpace if you want to. We support the creation of rich equations using a built-in LaTeX editor. So for the mathematicians, the computer scientists, the physicists who are used to working with LaTeX to produce publication-ready mathematical expressions, that's fully supported. We also support inserting code snippets. This can be useful for showing your downstream audience things like the code that you used in a particular Python script or in an R script used to do data analysis. This code is put into a nice little safe sandbox so that it can't be used to introduce malicious code within the system. I can add comments that can be used to start a threaded discussion with my colleagues about what I see on this page, and anyone who has access to this page will be able to contribute to this discussion. I can link to data on the internet or to other items that are already in RSpace. Or if I prefer, I can link to items that are outside of RSpace. So for example, here we have a link that's pointing at a Dropbox file. I can click on that, and that will take me to Dropbox when I'm in view mode. And if I want to, I can then go ahead and work with that inside Dropbox. And Dropbox is, even as you'll see, it's nice enough to actually open that file for me so I can see the content on it and work with it if I'd like to. So here's that link. If I click on it, we'll be taken straight to Dropbox, and Dropbox will actually open that file for me. We also can link to data held in other external sources, like, for example, OneDrive, GitHub, or your nearby local SMB or SFTP file stores. And recently, we've also added the capability to link to large data files or data sets that are held in external iRODS volumes. This is an extremely useful feature because increasingly many scientists in different fields now are working with very, very large files, things like high resolution images, next generation sequencing files, flow cytometry data, or other data where the file size can be significant. Now, if you wanted to, you could drag and drop those files into RSpace, and you can set your maximum attached file size in RSpace to be quite high. But honestly, there's not really a lot to be gained by keeping high resolution files in more than one location at once. So typically, we recommend that your very large files you actually keep in an external storage facility designed for that purpose. And then you can easily link to them from within RSpace. To show you how simple that is, I'll go ahead and I'll put my cursor at the top of the page. I'll say Insert from Gallery. I'll click on the file store link. That will connect me to some of my nearby file stores and file store mount points that I've configured to work with RSpace. I can select one of these. I can enter a username and some credentials for this particular user. And that will connect me to an external file store that has nothing to do with RSpace. It's just a generic file store that I happen to have access to. I could select a couple of files from within that file store and say insert, and RSpace will be happy to insert links to those. Best of all, when it's time for me to go ahead and export this document and send it to an archive, something like Zenodo or some other supported archive of some sort, I absolutely can go ahead, and when I do the export, I have the option to choose a particular format, and then I can say I'd like to include those linked file stores that are outside of RSpace initially. And RSpace will then reach out and it will pluck those files from those third-party locations, bundle them up with all of your other data, and then seamlessly send the whole lot off to your repository. I can do that by just saying I'd like to send the data to a repository, clicking next. I can quickly, if I want to, decide on which repository I'd like to send this to. And I can even associate this particular export bundle with a previously created data management plan that's held in an external data management plan system, like, for example, DMP Online. So this actually seamlessly then brings great traceability to your research, because now it's possible for third parties to trace your research from the data management plan held in a data management plan system through the collection of data on the bench that was performed by ResearchBase, all the way to the ultimate resting place for that data in a third-party repository, with DOIs linking the whole thing together and making it very clear exactly how that data was collected, who was involved, where the original plan was, etc. Finally, we also support a range of other different specialized data types as well. For example, for people working with booking systems, you can go ahead and add tables of data indicating, for example, the details of a particular event where you used a specific instrument for a particular piece of research. Or you can insert tables of data pulled from other third-party systems like PyRat. We also fully support working with things like chemistry structure files too as well. RSpace includes a built-in chemistry structure drawing tool. So if I want to, I could go ahead and draw a chemistry molecule for you. I can go ahead here and make a little bit of space at the top of the page, click on the ChemAxon drawing tool, and from here I could draw something very simple, like, for example, ethane or propane for you, and then go ahead and say insert to add that onto my page. Now, if I were a real chemist, chances are, though, I would probably already have at my disposal a range of different chemistry tools. And you can see that one of the things that RSpace does here for me is it actually goes ahead and calculates a little bit of molecular metadata based on the structure of this file type. But if I'm a real chemist and I'm working with more complex and elaborate chemistry structures, chances are I probably already have them nearby on my local computer. So one of the things that I can do is I can access my local machine, and I can go ahead and look for some chemistry structures. And we support all chemistry structures in standard industry file types, like, for example, CDX, but also mol files. I'll just go ahead and I'll grab a couple of mol files here, Taxol and serotonin, and I'll just go ahead and drag and drop those onto my page. RSpace is happy to go ahead and add those chemical structures to my page. It will also render them so that I can see them nicely. It will produce that same table of related structural chemistry metadata that I can see here if I want to. And then notice also that when I check the gallery, I can see that those two chemistry files that I just added have also been added to my gallery and are now available for me to use in other contexts elsewhere in RSpace. I can even go ahead and look at the info for this button. I can see it's been immediately assigned a unique identifier. I could add a searchable caption. I can see where and when it was added. And again, by clicking Show Link Documents, I can see that that file has been used in at least one RSpace experimental workflow. You'll also notice here that RSpace will generate little previews for these, so you can see what the structure of that molecule looks like without necessarily having to open the file. When I'm done, I can just close this window. Notice that in RSpace, you can go ahead and open as many tabs or windows as you like in order to support things like efficient multitasking. RSpace includes a powerful search engine. If I want to, I can go back to the workspace and I can either perform a very simple Google-like search where perhaps I will just look for a single particular word by entering that word here. And so if I do something fairly generic, like, for example, let's look for, I don't know, Volvox, and see if we can find anything that matches that particular search criteria. And we can see here we get some hits right away that might include documents, little snippets of content that I've made earlier, and experimental workflows. And I can see exactly all of those items here. But you can see in this case, I get a lot of hits because Volvox is quite a vague description. So if I wanted to, I could be a little bit more specific. I could say I want to search only for things that meet these different search criteria. Or I could do an advanced search where I can join together a range of different search parameters to form a Boolean query. Now, this will be very powerful and useful to you as you gradually accumulate more data in RSpace. After 5 or 10 years of working with the product, it's likely that you'll be sitting on an ocean of data, and you'll need to use some more advanced search techniques to find things. One of my favorite features in RSpace is the fact that we fully support something called the Lucene structured query language. So I can type an L and then a colon to say I'm going to do a Lucene search. And now I can say I'd like to search for something that contains both the word DNA and the word RNA, and it also has to include the word sequence. So let's go ahead and do that search. And we'll probably still get quite a lot of hits because that's quite a common set of terms there. Now I can narrow down this search further by eliminating things I don't want to see. I could now go ahead and say not worm. And that will eliminate from my search results a whole range of things that I don't want to see. Now I could perhaps also say not algae and not yeast, and that will limit down the search even further. And I can just keep going until I get to a manageable list of items. You can see here we're already on a fairly short list of things here that are appropriate, but I could just keep going until I find just the thing that I'm looking for. And this is really going to help you find things that are relevant to you amongst thousands of similar closely related documents after you've been working with RSpace for some time. Finally, if you are done with your experiment and you'd like to digitally sign your work so that your colleagues can easily be aware of the fact that it's been now finished and completed, and you can verify all the people who are involved, you can go ahead and you can open up any document at any time. And if you want to, you can just go ahead and click on the signing button to go ahead and sign that document to lock down your intellectual property and to make sure that the document is fully protected and you have a good listing of all the people who are involved in working with that document. So that's a little bit about the ELN side. Now, perhaps that's in the last minute or two here. I'll probably just keep talking until someone actually tells me to stop, since it's not clear exactly how long the coffee break here will last at EOS today. So let's go ahead and in whatever time we have left, we'll take a quick look at the inventory because it's such a nice new system and it's worth taking a look at. So the inventory system comes with 3 panels, a sidebar, a navigational tree, and a details panel. You can actually collapse the sidebar if you want to make a little bit more room. And you can immediately start exploring your inventory and your materials using the using this area here. And this is highly filterable, and it sort of replaces something like the Macintosh Finder or the Windows File Explorer. Only instead of navigating through folders looking for files, you'll be navigating through hierarchically organized containers looking for samples and materials that you use often. So I'm going to start out by saying I'd like to look just at my top level containers. I'll say do a search for containers and show me just the ones that belong to me. And that will show me a list of top level containers. And top level containers are large things like rooms, major freezers, and so forth that define the area where I work. And I'm going to change this from list view into what's called tree mode. And this will allow me to see little thumbnails of these items. And if I want to now, I can see that one of my top level containers is a room. And inside that room, I have one freezer. And in that freezer, I have a number of shelves. And on those shelves, I have a freezer box. And if I wanted to, I can actually look inside that freezer box from here and look at the individual items that are in that freezer box. Or I could tap that freezer box to select it in the details panel. And now I can see details about that box here, including things like details about how it's going to be stored and temperature it's located at, and also things like the barcodes that have been either generated by RSpace or associated with this item. I can see any attachments that are associated with this container. But I can also down here see a map of the contents. So here we can see a grid layout for that freezer box, and I can see all of the items that are inside it. I can mouse over these if I want to, just get more information about each one, or I can select an item, immediately see the sibling subsamples that are associated with this. In other words, aliquots that are all identical. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and I could select the whole lot all in one go. And I could now, if I wanted to, go ahead and move those to some new location. Perhaps I'll just go ahead and I'll put these on my own bench, indicating to my colleagues that I'm going to be working with these samples. I can also search for things using the barcode too as well. One of my favorite features of the inventory system is that we support both the old-fashioned laser scanners, but we also support a range of new technologies based on visual recognition of different barcodes. So, for example, let's imagine I find something on my bench and I'd like to get more information about it. I can open up the barcode search and I can hold up the item. In this case, it's a Petri dish until my camera on my computer recognizes it. I'll say search, and RSpace says, oh yes, I know what that is. It's a Petri dish. And I know that that item should be located in your 37-degree incubator, which looks like this. And if I need to zoom in on it, I can see that exactly what that item looks like. And I can see from this breadcrumb trail that the incubator is located in this room. So now if I tap that room, I'll be able to see an image of the room. I can sort of look a little bit more closely at that with an enlarged view if I want to. Or if I want to, I can look at the map of this room. So this room has been set up to be what's called a visual container. And visual containers allow me to set locations for different items in my room. So now I know what is physically located in each of my drawers and cabinets in my lab. And here, for example, we can see the incubator again. And if I want to, I could go ahead and just tap that and say open to take a closer look at that incubator. And here at the bottom of the page, I can see the full list of all the things that are normally inside that container. And if I'd like to know where they were before they were in this incubator, I can even say, show me the previous location for these items. And this tells me where these items were before they were in the incubator, which can be extremely useful when you're trying to understand the history of different items and how they've moved around your lab. How are we doing for time now? It's 10:36. At this point, I will probably switch to my iPad. So here you can see on the iPad, I'm going to go ahead and drop that into, pay no attention to the picture of my wife here. I'll go ahead and enter my code for this to unlock my iPad. And I'll drop into landscape mode. And now I'll show you how easy it is to work with the iPad on with RSpace. So I could, for example, tap on a particular document to load it, and that will allow me to see the content of that document. I can simply swipe through this document if I want to with my finger to look at the content. I can edit this on my iPad very easily. Or if I want to, I can go back into portrait mode, and I can go back to the workspace and I can say, I'd like to look at the inventory system on my iPad. So here on the iPad now, you can see the inventory system. The inventory system adapts very quickly for the size of the screen that you're working with. So here you can see it's detected that I'm on a mobile device, and it's showing me just one column at a time. And if I want to, I can say here, I'd like to look at my containers, and that will show me a list of the containers that I have access to. Again, if I want to, I can scroll through this and I can see what's in this container. I can change the view mode if I want to change the contents of that container into a nice flat list so I can easily see what's in there. Now I could look in a particular drawer, and inside that drawer, I can see that I have a number of different FFPE samples. If I tap on one of those, that will take me to that page so that I can see the details of that particular sample. I can go ahead and collapse all of these different sections if I want to make this the display look a little bit clearer. And then if I want to, I can in turn look at each of these different sections to learn more about the sample. I can see the overview. I can see additional details here. I can look at the barcodes and generate new barcodes or print barcodes from here. I can see whether there are any attachments associated with this sample. And I can also see my custom fields. So custom fields allow us to add whatever rich metadata we want to a particular sample. Perhaps as a better example, if I look for something that I know I've worked with a lot, like for example, a particular antibody. Then I can go ahead and take a look at one of these representative antibodies. This particular one is what's called a subsample, and I'd like to go ahead and look at the family of subsamples that this individual thing belongs to. So let's go ahead and tap the parent antibody sample link to look at the description for the parent sample. And again, from here, if I want to, I could collapse all of these sections. And I'm going to focus in just on the custom fields area. So notice here we have a rich array of custom metadata associated with this sample. This custom metadata is highly configurable and customizable based on what you need to know about any of your particular samples or items that you store in your particular lab or in your particular research sector. This configurability and customizability of the RSpace inventory system makes it extremely powerful because it means you can use it to store and work with absolutely anything that you're working with your lab. You can also easily bulk import items using our import tool, or you can create new new items manually from the create area. You can also go ahead and export your data very easily in a number of different formats, particularly CSV files. And then at any time, you can actually also go ahead and you can build your items into these things called baskets. So if I need to work with a series of samples that are going to be in an experiment I'll be working with soon, I can arbitrarily select some of my samples. And I could say, I'd like to add all of those to a particular basket. And let's give this basket a custom name. We'll just call it wax and say add to basket. This is now an arbitrary collection of things that I use often in my work. And if I want to, I could now add this list of items to an experiment that I'm working with in the RSpace ELN area. So I could, for example, open up this untitled document. Notice that all of this is being done on my iPad too as well. And look how seamless and easy it is to work with this mobile device. I can go ahead and tap new list of materials. I can go ahead and say I'd like to add items to this list of materials that I'll be using in this experiment. I could select the materials I want in a number of ways. I could manually select things here by tapping on them, or unselect them if I prefer. I could perform a search for the items. I could rummage around in my container hierarchy looking for the items. But in this case, what I'll do is I'll just base this list on a previous basket that I built in the inventory system. Let's choose that wax basket that I made earlier. Go ahead and select all of these items and say choose. And that's now going to generate for me a list of materials that will be used in this experiment. I can specify the volume that I'll be using in the experiment if I want to, or I can just go ahead and tap save to now save this list of materials. So now notice that if I now go back to the ELN view, on my ELN view here, I have an indicator that I can tap that shows me any lists that I've built. And here's the list of wax samples that I added to this experiment earlier. If I export this experiment, it will go ahead and include that list of materials. I can also go back to that list of materials and edit it at any time. What's really nice about this, though, is if I go ahead and I look at the list of materials that I've already made, and I tap on the link to get me back to the inventory system to look at that sample in more detail, one of the things that I can now do in the inventory area is I could go ahead and look at the info for this item, and it will actually tell me which different experiments those wax blocks have been used in. And I can see here at the top of the list is the experiment that I just added them to. But the second item on the list is a different experiment made by someone else entirely that's not me, who apparently has used this same sample in at least one experiment that they've performed. And if I'd like to talk to that person to find out more about what they did, I can tap their name to get more information about that individual. And from here, I can get things like their email address. I can see which labs they belong to, and I can easily find out who their PI is and where they're working. It's these kind of connections between samples, experiments, people, events, and the history of your research in the lab that really make RSpace very special, because it's allowing you to trace your data backwards, forwards, and sideways any which way you want. Okay, so it looks like the coffee break is ending now, so I'll go ahead and stop at this point. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope that was useful for you. And if you have any other questions, do feel free to contact us.